While I'm waiting for it to be 7 o'clock, I just want to explain that what the Planning Commission is. The Planning Commission is a body of citizens that's appointed by the Town Council to listen to applications, disputes, issues related to land use in the town of Los Gatos. That could be building, that could be cutting down trees, that could be uses of property. We are not, in some cases, the ultimate deciding authority. That responsibility belongs to the town council. So the two issues we're going to be deciding tonight actually ultimately are going to be decided by the town council. The planning commission is responsible just to make a recommendation to the town council, and the town council will pass on those issues. The procedure we're going to follow tonight is, if you'd like to talk, please turn in one of these yellow cards. You'll find them on the back of the benches that are in front of you. And you may hand them in on either side of the desk up here, and they'll get to me, and I'll call your name. Everybody that has one of these yellow cards, if you're not an applicant, you'll have 3 minutes to talk. The applicant will have a combined 5 minutes. Then we will close the public portion of the hearing. The Planning Commission will make a decision or a motion, and then we'll move on. So that's the process. So I think it's 7 o'clock. And so I'm going to call the meeting to order. Clink. And can we do the roll call?
Commissioner Bourgeois,
Here.
Commissioner O'Donnell,
Here.
Commissioner Erickson,
Here.
and Vice Chair Jensen.
Here.
Okay, we have 3 excused absence, Commissioner Ogle, Commissioner Telesfor, and Chair Sayoc.
Thank you. Will you all join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you. And one thing I forgot to say is that if you do have an electronic device like a plane, you don't have to turn it all the way off, but if you would silence it, we'd appreciate it. Now we come to approval of minutes of our last meeting. And Ms. Mallison, I do have your card. But first, I'm going to look to any of the commissioners if you have any changes or amendments or corrections to the minutes of June 22nd. Seeing none, Ms. Mallison, I have a card from you. You'd like to address the minutes?
Thank you. I had some comments. I felt that the write-up in the minutes, as far as my concerns, that the two important parts got skipped. And do you have the papers?
Yes, we do. Thank you.
Okay, and I can read those. I felt that there were two important issues. In reading over my comments, I felt that the minutes stated that I was only concerned about the visual part of this project at 1616-1 on Short Road. But actually, I'm also concerned about the physical aspect and how that impacts our property. And I had mentioned that if this house is built on its proposed location, our house will have 3 side lot setbacks. We have minimum amounts of land on 3 of the 4 sides. And that the proposed house is just simply too close without a backyard setback. And the second part is that I also said our property is 72 feet wide with a proposed house 64 feet wide and 15 feet back from the property, and it's over 20 feet tall, and that it's just too close and too massive to the property line. And the house wall is actually taller than the sound walls along Highway 17. And I would like to see some of this incorporated into the minutes so that my comments don't look like it's all visual, because it does physically impact us greatly. And if you don't need to put everything in there, but if there would be at least some reference to what I had here, it would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. First, I should say to you and to everybody in the audience, we don't do word-for-word minutes. We sort of do summary minutes, so you may not see all of your comments verbatim when you look at the minutes, but we appreciate your comments.
Some reference.
And your comments will go into the record for tonight's evening,
Okay.
tonight's minutes. So if you can have a seat, then the commission will decide what to do with your comments.
you.
Thank you very much. So her comments tonight will in fact be incorporated in minutes for this meeting, correct?
Correct, but we can add them to the previous minutes, therefore it's more clear on the record when we look at the minutes for what the direction taken by the commission
Okay.
on the matter.
Is there a motion then on the minutes? Commissioner O'Donnell.
Yeah, I was going to make a motion that we approve the minutes, however, adjusted pursuant to the comments of July 13th, which we have before us, which are the comments we've just heard about. So the motion would be to amend the minutes, and as so amended, to approve the minutes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Bourgeois, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So the minutes will be amended, Ms. Mallison, as you requested. Then I have a question for staff, because the next item in our agenda is requested continuances. Although we didn't have one formally, we do have one tonight. Should that be considered in the order when we get to item number 1?
It's under written communications, so if you determine you want to act on the request for a continuance, if you want to hear it, just let them know you're going to hear it in the normal order.
What's the commission's, well, I'm just going to be autocratic here and say let's just consider it when we get to item 1. Is that okay with everyone? Okay. So although we do have a requested continuance, we are going to hear it when we get to item number 1 in its normal order. Now it is time for subcommittee reports. Were there any subcommittees that people met on? And just for the information of the audience and those people really bored who might be watching at home, planning commissioners do meet, are part of other subcommittees other than the planning commission, which have to do with land use issues in town. So often we will give a report about those here. And there is one.
I forgot, sorry. I believe since the last meeting there was a meeting of the North 40 Specific Plan Advisory Committee, which 3 members of this body sit on. And it was largely a background review where we reviewed some important issues facing the North 40. Predominantly, the discussion was around the role that the town has and that the project has and the impact it has on schools and what we can and can't do relative to schools in a specific plan. So that was the majority of the meeting.
Thank you, Commissioner Bourgeois, and I've been informed that I should go back and go over formally written communications. We do actually have 3 desk items tonight, 1 on item number 1 and 2 on item number 2. Have commissioners had an opportunity to look at those and are aware of those? Okay, thank you. And now is the time in our meeting where if somebody would like to speak about something that is not on tonight's agenda, this is your opportunity to do so. You have 3 minutes to do that. I do have 1 card of someone that would like to talk, and that is Diana Abati.
Thank you and good evening, members of the Town Planning Commission. I just wanted to take a moment and introduce myself. Most people have seen me in the newspaper, but I'm the new superintendent of the Los Gatos Union School District. And I just wanted to say, first of all, I had a chance to meet your town manager, Greg Larson, and his team, and I've already feel at home. And I just want to say that I'm here to support you guys and to have you come over and extend a personal invitation to come visit us at our school, and I will take you to all of our sites to see the great things that we're doing. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else that would like to talk about something that's not on the agenda tonight? Okay, seeing no one, I'm going to move to item number 1. Commissioners, as you're all aware, we did get a request from the applicant to continue this item to our meeting of August 10th. I don't know if it might be appropriate to have the applicant give us a little bit more detail. We did get a letter, which is very brief, just requesting a continuance as to why you are requesting the continuance. We'd appreciate that. And just let us know who you are.
Hi, I'm Tim Steele. I'm the Senior Director of Real Estate Planning for Sobrato Organization. The reason is I just learned this morning that there was a chance that we wouldn't have a quorum or a low attendance, if you will, on on the CDC, and I checked them against the participants that were involved in the CDAC meeting that we had last January with respect to this project a year and a half ago. And a lot of the work that we've done in working with staff is to address the comments that the CDAC had suggested. And I thought it would be good for continuity's sake to at least provide them the opportunity to attend this meeting and hear the subject and the item. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The CDAC is made up of planning commissioners and town council members. Town council members would normally not be at a planning commission meeting, and members of the CDAC who are also commissioners would obviously attend a planning commission meeting. Some of them aren't here tonight, so even with a continuance, it may be the case that all those people aren't going to be here. But let's see what the pleasure of the commission is. Does anyone have any comments? Commissioner Bourgeois.
Just before we go any further on this item, I do have an additional disclosure I'd like to make. I lived at the subject property at the time when Sobrato purchased the property. There was a tenant-wide rental dispute. I was a part of that as a tenant representative. It was resolved through arbitration. I no longer live there. I have no conflicts, and I'm quite confident I can judge this without bias. So I wanted to disclose that, but I will not be recusing myself.
Thank you, Commissioner Bourgeois. Comments regarding the requested continuance. Commissioner Erickson.
I have a couple of questions for Mr. Steele, if we could ask him to return. Is your application to the town for this project complete?
Yes.
Since you submitted your application, has any additional information come to light with respect to the project that would require you to prepare some additional materials to anything that you've submitted that might have a material effect on the outcome?
No.
Thank you.
Other comments or questions? Commissioner O'Donnell.
Following up on what Commissioner Erickson said, I think that is probably most expeditious both for the applicant and for the commission and our scheduling. If we hear it this evening, we have a complete report. There's no guarantee that when we have the next meeting on August the 10th, who will be here, as July and August are sometimes difficult months, pleasant months, but difficult. I don't see any disadvantage or taking advantage of the applicant because there are only 4 of us. And because of that, I just would like to express an opinion that it would probably be to his advantage, to everybody's advantage, to go forward. And secondly, we don't, as you pointed out, we don't make the decision. This is a recommendation to the town council. So unlike some matters, which become fewer as the days go by, where we do make a final decision, this one we don't. So I would be in favor of going forward this evening.
Given those comments, does anyone have a motion with respect to the requested continuance? Commissioner Bourgeois.
I'll make some comments, and the reason I'm not making a motion is because I feel a little different. I feel, I agree and appreciate Commissioner O'Donnell's comments, but I don't ever remember if an applicant has requested a continuance, I can't remember denying it. We have a quorum, we have a complete application, but if he wishes for whatever reason to continue it, I think it's their prerogative. I would, at the very least, like to have a public hearing. We have a pretty full house here. I don't know if they're here for item 1 or item 2. I'm assuming some of these people are here from item 1. I'd like to at least receive public comment at a bare minimum, and then maybe continue the item once we get to commission discussion, so that we can take public comment for the people that are here that may not be able to attend at the next meeting because they probably prepared. So that would be at a bare minimum what I would like to do.
I'm going to make a comment in response to your comments. I think whether an item gets continued is within the discretion of the commission, and obviously if an applicant requests it, that has a lot of weight with respect to whether we grant it or not. My concerns are that this is a major project and that we could end up taking an action that ends up being voted on either a split vote, where nothing happens, or it perhaps is denied or approved by a vote of 3 commissioners, which would not normally form a majority if we had a full contingent of planning commissioners here. So I have some concern with that. I respectfully disagree with Commissioner Bourgeois on whether it's worthwhile to have a public hearing tonight. I think it's a disservice to the Planning Commission, to the public, and to the applicant to have duplicate hearings where there's no result. So I think that what would happen if we had a hearing for the sake of having a hearing and then continue it to have another hearing, which is the same thing, and we know in advance that there's no action going to come out of what we do tonight, I don't know that that's the best use of everyone's time and efforts. So that would be my response to that. Commissioner Erickson.
I guess while I would respect the applicant's ability to request us to continue the item, but I don't think when we typically do continuances, it is because there's some reason for having to do with information that might be material to the decision that's at hand. And that was the reason for my asking 2 very explicit questions of the applicant. So to my sense, those questions were asked and answered. Our procedural rules say that we can meet and take full action of the Planning Commission with a quorum of 4. We have that quorum. We have, in my judgment, no basis upon which to continue the item.
Commissioner.
I agree with what Commissioner Erickson said, and further, as far as precedent is concerned, I can't sit here and recall specifically, but I've been involved in continuances, requests for continuance for 50 years, and normally there has to be some prejudice to somebody before you grant a continuance. There is no prejudice here, unless one alleges that the 3 missing commissioners somehow add something to this, which would probably be a mistake to the 4 of us still sitting here. I think this would be good for the applicant because the final decision will be made by the town council, and most projects want to reach a resolution or an end. Secondly, the people who are here who want to comment about it, it's not the easiest thing in the world to come down on a nice evening and sit here. So while you could bifurcate the hearing, and we've done that before, and you don't repeat it, so it isn't a total repeat, I agree with Commissioner Erickson. There is no showing as to any prejudice at all to go forward. It has been agendized and set and publicly noticed, and I would request that we go forward. I think it is unfortunate that before we get to the substance of this matter, it's clear that something as perhaps procedural as a continuance obviously has engendered this much discussion, but it's good. It shows we're all thinking about this. So, but I'm just a little surprised.
Is there a motion?
As near as I know, this is set on. Let me just find out from council whether this is correct. This is set, and unless we remove it from being heard tonight, it will be heard tonight. If someone wants to make a motion to continue it, they should do so. I am not making a motion.
The motion.
I was going to ask, once the applicant requests a continuance, doesn't that serve as a request that we must then act on as a body?
The motion would be is if somebody moves for a continuance, and absent that, then this commission by consensus can just agree to hear the matter.
What happens if there's a split?
There has to be a motion on before the commission, and I think before we indicate if it's a 2-2, we would ask that you folks continue to discuss it and resolve the matter.
Just a point of clarification. If a motion is made and it's 2-2, doesn't it fail? Therefore, the motion to continue would fail, and it would be heard this evening.
It would
correct?
fail
All
if
right.
a 2-2.
Thank you.
Okay, just so that we have everything on the record, I'm going to make a motion to continue this to our meeting of August 10th. Is there any second? It fails for lack of a second, so we're going to hear it. So, Mr. Steele, you and anyone that's part of your team have now 5 minutes to talk to us about... Oh, I'm sorry. I cut off the staff report. You can think about what you're going to say. Ms. Davis, I apologize.
Okay. The property is located on Riviera Drive, which is a private street that's accessed from Millbrae and Rushmore Lanes, and those come off Town Terrace and University Avenue. It's within an area that is predominantly developed with apartment, multifamily residential complexes. The project site's 5.9 acres, and Los Gatos Creek runs along the western boundary of the site, and Highway 17 is beyond that. To the east and south, we have multifamily residential projects, and to the north are mostly single-family. The existing complex has 123 units. 102 of those are one-bedroom units, and 21 are two-bedroom units. There's 164 surface parking spaces. 62 of those are covered by carports. There's also a pool and an extensive landscaping area on the site. The project was constructed in 1960. It was purchased by the applicant about 10 years ago. The current density is 20.8 units to the acre. The current density exceeds the allowable under the RM 12 to 20 zoning designation by 5 units. 118 would be allowed by today's standards. So it's currently non-conforming as to the density. The CDAC considered conceptual plans to add 56 units to the site in January of 2010. The CDAC made comments. Those were summarized in the staff report. The applicant, through refining the plans, ended up requesting 50 units as opposed to the original 56 that they conceptually proposed. So the proposal is to add 50 new units to the complex within 4 new buildings. These are 3-story buildings, approximately 35 feet high. 24 of the existing apartments are proposed to be converted to affordable units, and these would be low-income units. And 1 new unit would be designated as a moderate income unit. New amenities are proposed to be added to the site. The pool would be removed and replaced with a new pool and spa. A fitness center, leasing center, and resident lounge, and a barbecue area are also proposed. Environmental review was done on the project. We prepared an initial study and mitigated negative declaration, which was sent out to the Planning Commission when the environmental documents went out for the 30-day public review period, and the mitigated negative deck was also reattached to the staff report. As part of the environmental review, a number of technical reviews were done, including an arborist, architectural, geotechnical, C3 compliance, stormwater runoff, traffic, and biological analysis. Merits of the applicant's proposal include provision of 25 affordable units. The complex currently has none, and of those, 24 would be designated as low-income units. The town currently has about 145 BMP units in its system. 93 of those are rental and 42 are owner-occupied units. Those are predominantly moderate income units. It's very tough to get low and very low-income units. The on-site parking ratio would increase with the proposal. There's not currently a parking issue on the site. Based on code, you have to have guest parking in addition to the parking for the apartments. So the proposal includes parking spaces that would be adequate to cover the number of apartments that is proposed, but there's no guest parking being proposed. If you look at the state density bonus law, which is what the applicant is proposing to bring this project in under, that dictates that the maximum parking the town can request is 1 space for a 1-bedroom unit and 2 spaces for a 2-bedroom unit. Based on that, a total of 220 parking spaces would be required. The applicant's proposing 261. So the staff report didn't explain that one component. This report says that they're short on guest parking, and the commission has some discretion on that issue based on the merits of the project and the site characteristics. really, when you look at the state density bonus law, it's stating a requirement for 220, which the applicant is complying with. The state density bonus law is the calculations that we provided to you in the staff report is based on 118 units. The RM 12 to 20 zoning would allow 118, so we started with that as a base as opposed to the 123 that currently exist. If you take 20% of the 118 units, that's 23.6 or 24. The state density bonus says you round up no matter what the incremental percentage is. 35% density bonus based on the provision of 20% affordable units times that 118 gives you 41.3, or round up to 42. If you take the 118 existing units, add the 42, that's 160, and you add in the 24 affordable units because those do not count against density, that gives us a total of 185. The applicant's proposing 173. The commission's role is to, in this particular case, is to provide a recommendation to the town council. Required findings are that the proposed amendment or the rezoning, which would be created if the PD is approved, is consistent with the general plan. You also need to make a recommendation on the mitigation monitoring plan and the mitigated negative declaration. And there is also a draft PD ordinance with all of the conditions or performance standards included. And we would like the commission, if the recommendation is for approval of the project, to recommend that ordinance, and you could add or modify conditions as appropriate. That concludes the staff report, and if you have any conditions, we'll attempt to answer those.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. Are there any comments or questions for staff? Commissioner O'Donnell.
I have 3 or 4 questions, and if it's the chair's pleasure, I could ask them that way, or we can stagger them, because I notice Commissioner Bourgeois also has a question.
I think you should just go ahead with your questions, then we'll move on to the next person.
Okay, the first question I have is there's an unpaved area there by the property which people park on. When we talk about parking that you've just talked about, does that include the unpaved portion or not?
I'm not counting unpaved parking spaces.
Okay.
I'm counting marked designated parking spaces.
That
on the property.
unpaved parking will, I assume, ultimately be paved and become parking or not?
It is, yes, there's pavement proposed. Are you talking about towards the north end of the site?
Yes, when you come into the property from the side to the extreme left, there's I would say 2 lanes of unpaved parking, which is fairly well parked. So that, under this project, would become paved. Is that correct?
I'm going to take a look at the site plan. They're proposing on the east side, there's several rows of parking, and then there's a whole paved area on the extreme west side, close to the creek, that is going to be parking, and then there's parking all along Riviera.
I know I'm not on the mic, try to speak loud, but I'm talking about up here.
That is proposed to be new parking.
Question. The next question I have is, this is the first time we've had an application under the state law, is that correct? And if I read that correctly, if we are wrong, if we deny a permit like this without sufficient justification, an applicant actually can bring an action, I'll address this to council, can bring an action, and if the applicant is successful, we pay attorney's fees and costs and the whole thing, and it gets done. Is that correct?
That is correct under state density bonus law.
And then, as I understand, what Ms. Davis said is that, as proposed, this would meet all of our parking requirements, whereas the initial report we had said there was no guest parking, but that in fact, if we calculate the way you've just calculated, we'd be okay in any event. In other words, it's over-parked pursuant to our regulations.
It's overparked pursuant to state density bonus law relative to parking. It is underparked if you take the town code requirement for the guest parking, which is asking for 1 space per unit for guest parking.
Okay, and my final question would be, it does appear that we're giving a cumulative bonus. Is that correct? In other words, you talk about 20% and then you talk about 35%. And I noticed one of the desk items I think one of the commentors questioned that. Is that what we're doing, using a double bonus?
I don't think it's a double bonus. We did review the information submitted by Lee Quintana, and we think she calculated it a little bit differently. She made some different assumptions than staff did, and staff has reviewed the state law numerous times and gone back and back-checked this, and we feel we have calculated it correctly based on the code, the state law.
And I'm not questioning the correctness, I'm just trying to understand it. I thought you had said you first applied 20%. And council seems to know.
Right.
So, or if Commissioner Erickson wants to jump in too, but let me just explain. What the state law requires you to do is, if you meet the threshold of how many, the percentage of the low-income units, so you take the 20% of the 118 of the existing, not of the maximum allowed under the zoning, which is 118, not the existing 123. And so once you meet that, which is the 20% times the 118, which was the 24, then once you agree to provide those 24 units, then over and above those 24 units, the applicant then gets a 35% density bonus under state law. So it's a two-part calculation. Once you meet the threshold for the 20% units then you do the calculation of the 35% of the existing, the 118 units, and that's where you get the 42.
Right.
And so it's 42 plus the 118. We're not even adding in the 5 that happen to be there that is over the allowed density. And then when you calculate it under state law, is you don't calculate those 24 units in that density of the 35. So it's not double counting, it's just following the law the way that the state legislature intended this and adopted.
Thank you very much.
Does that conclude your questions, Commissioner O'Donnell?
It does, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Bourgeois?
Thank you. I'd like to follow up on Commissioner O'Donnell's first question about the gravel parking lot. How were, because we have a comparison of existing parking spaces versus proposed parking spaces. How did you count the parking spaces in a gravel lot? Is there some area calculation, or was that not counted in the existing parking?
I didn't count that as existing parking because it's not paved double striped spaces as required by the town.
Okay.
So they may be using it for ancillary parking.
But it was not counted in the existing parking calculation?
Yeah, correct.
Okay, great. That's my question. Secondly, it sounds like 25 of the existing units, one-bedroom units, are going to be converted to BMPs.
It's not all one-bedroom units. The applicant will probably speak to this, but the intent is to do it proportionate to the number of one-bedrooms and number of two-bedrooms. So there'll be some of each.
Okay. And my question is, what happens to the existing tenants?
They will they're not going to ask any tenants to move out or displace any tenants. The units will be converted as vacancies arise.
Okay, so the BMPs won't be realized until vacancies occur?
Yes, but one of the things that we'll be doing is working with the applicant to prepare a plan for the phasing, and there'll be a time frame where they have to accommodate us, have all the affordable units in place before they get building permits to construct all the new units, or there'll be some sort of timing like that we agree on.
Okay, thank you.
Before we occupy all the new units, something like that.
Okay.
Other questions or comments? Commissioner Erickson?
I want to return to the parking. So to be sure that I understand, I appreciate all the stuff, because I had trouble following the math of all this too, and I eventually got to the same answer that the staff did. But whether or not the present parking spots that are being used that are not paved were counted in the count of existing parking seems to me not to be important, because if I understand correctly, there are 261 paved parking spots proposed in the project. Whether they are existing or new is somewhat irrelevant, it seems like to me, because the expectation is that, or the standard that we have to apply in this situation is 220
Correct.
parking spots. So to the extent that they have 261, whether they're all new, all existing, is
Some
really the only
combination thereof.
test. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So I actually have a question and a comment. Just following up on the parking again, and this goes into my more general question. This is probably for Ms. Prop. On page 8 of the staff report, under the table, it says, "The town does not have the discretion to disallow the proposed project based on a parking deficiency." So if that is the case, then it doesn't matter what the parking is, correct?
It's correct so long as Ms. Davis pointed out, is that the state law has a parking based on, the staff report refers to it as a parking ratio. The state law actually talks about it, parking spaces per bedroom in the units. Staff now calculated that, and we can't require any more than what the state law allows us to do based on the per bedroom count. And staff recalculated that and provided that information to you verbally tonight, indicating that the amount being provided is over what's required by state law.
Right, so once it's in compliance with state law, this body doesn't have the discretion to deny the project based on the fact that it doesn't comply with Los Gatos town parking requirements, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And my more general question is, what is the degree, if any, that the Planning Commission has if the project is basically coming through in compliance with the requirements of the state density bonus law?
So in the memo that's in the packet, and if you give me a minute, I will.
Before you summarize it, I think we appreciate it, we've had the chance to read it, but I just would like you to just summarize
Okay.
the
So
degree of
for the
discretion.
commission and the public is basically the way that density bonus law works is that the town has to grant, any community has to grant the request for the density bonus under state law if it's requested by the applicant, so long as they meet the state law provisions. The only, in some cases, that they have to make a showing that they're entitled to the incentive or concession that they're asking for, and in this case, they're only asking for one concession. They're allowed to, they've only asked for one of them, and that's parking, and I think the applicant can speak to that. But in these cases under the state law, the agency does have to grant the waiver, the concession, unless the applicant doesn't meet certain findings, and the findings that they have to meet is that they have to show that the concession or incentive is not required in order to provide for affordable housing, or that the concession or incentive has a specific adverse impact defined by the government code upon public health and safety. So there's very narrow, it's not so much, you don't really have discretion on the project, but you have discretion in whether or not whether they've met the test on the incentive or concession they're requesting.
Okay, thank you, and I'm going to follow up with my comment before I call on Commissioner Erickson. This doesn't really require a response. I just want to make a comment that this was another large project that we didn't have story poles on, and this has been a continuing issue with the Planning Commission, and I know it's an issue with me, and it's just struck me that it seems like the larger the project, the less likely we are to have story poles, and that's when we really need them, because I don't think that people are being properly noticed by something as obvious as story poles, and particularly when this route isn't something that people would normally travel unless they specifically had to go there. It makes it hard for residents who might be concerned about it for or against to really be aware of what's going on. I know there's a sign there, but it's pretty hard to figure out that there's something going on without something obvious like a story pole. So that's just my comment. Commissioner Erickson.
Just as a point of clarification, as a follow-up to Commissioner Jensen's question, I think that, as my understanding is correctly, the Commission does have discretion with respect to the community benefit issue in compliance with the traffic policy, because that's not governed by the state density bonus law. So we have some discretion with respect to the community benefit, if I understand correctly.
That is correct.
Okay, any other questions or comments of staff and the commission? Ms. Bailey?
I have two comments. One is in regards to the story poles. Staff felt it was a safety issue because it's an active complex and it would interfere with the function of the existing apartment complex. So that is why in this case we did not require the story poles. And then just for clarification, I realize in our draft plan development ordinance we use the word below market price units. We will need to change that. These are considered affordable housing units. So the term is not below market price units for this instance.
And let me just ask Ms. Prop, the lawyer in me, the state density bonus law calls it affordable housing units, so we need to make sure that we comply with that. Is that the case?
Go ahead. So what applicant has requested is approval for this project under the state guidelines for density bonus, and those are what we would be approving is affordable rental units. Staff interchange that. BMP refers to the town code and town ordinance for below market price units, which is a different calculation. And in this case, as pointed out in the staff report, they not only meet but exceed that. If this were not a density bonus project, the applicant meets the towns, but in this case, because they're not asking to move forward under a traditional housing project, but rather be entitled to the density, then we should be referring to these units as affordable housing units at the, most of them at the low income level and one at the moderate income level.
Okay, thank you. Does that take care of our questions and comments? Thank you very much for your patience, ladies and gentlemen. We know that sometimes this seems like we're taking a lot of time, but we want to make sure that we get it right. So, Mr. Steele, now is your opportunity, and you have 5 minutes for yourself or you and any other representative that you brought with you. And I should point out that after members of the public speak, you'll have an opportunity to come back up and make comments with respect to what might have been said, and you'll have 3 minutes for that.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here tonight. Excuse me. My name again is Tim Steele. I'm the Senior Director of Real Estate Planning for the Sbrado organization. I do want to introduce, but I'm not planning on them speaking yet unless there's questions. Our architect is Jim Guthrie from JGA Architects. Janet Hiddle is from the Gazzardo Partnership. Mark Knutson is our civil engineer from Kieran Wright, and they're here available to answer any of your technical questions specific to the proposal. Second, I'd like to thank you. We've been in this cycle, in a sense, for almost 11 years. Listening and talking with the council, the planning commissioners at different times, and with staff, and like to be thought of as a long-term organization with a long-term view. A little bit of history about this project, as it's been alluded to in the staff report, is Riviera Terrace was built in 1960, so we're looking at a 50-year-old project. The amenities are 50 years old. The addressing of the amenities, those that are provided for a site this big, are 50 years old. There's no significant updating to the project relative to amenities or improvements over the last 50 years other than basic maintenance. There's no clubhouse. There's no real leasing office. We use an existing unit of the 123 units as our business and leasing office. The pool is dated. There is no spa, there is no fitness center, there is no front door. You have to go and look for the leasing office. There's no trash enclosures, and the general lacking of amenities has been a long-term concern of the Sbrado organization. We bought the property in 2000, and it is 100% a market rate project. We've been working with staff over this time to try to figure out how to find a way to enhance and add and improve the amenities to the project. In 2001, we came forward with our first idea, at which we had 120 units proposed for this project, in addition to the 123 that are currently there. There was a very clear message. It came from the CDAC, and that was too dense. No other conversation. So we took that in 2001 and sat on it and thought about it and continued to take care of the property and manage the property accordingly. It took us a long time to think about the property in a way that met the expectations of the CDAC. In 2010, in January, I came forward with a new idea, and that was similar to what is up on the wall today, but it represented 56 units, less than half of what the original proposal was in 2001. We heard from the CDAC at that time their ideas. They liked the idea that there was a way to enhance this property. They liked the way the buildings stair-step down the hill, the elevation change towards the creek, versus if you can look at the existing pictures of the existing buildings, the long corridored building that runs left to right as you look at it from the street, stays at a certain elevation even though the site is dropping, and then takes a very significant drop 2/3 down the project by about 20 feet and then steps off again. So that the project, as elevation drops off, becomes much larger in view. The buildings in the middle actually stair step down and provide more of a contour and following the contour. There was a lot of conversation around the need for more below market rent units within the city and town, excuse me. And in those BMR units, there was even more concern and desire to see low or very low units. So the plan in front of you has considered those requests and directions. The on-site parking was of some concern, and we think in improving the dirt lots, and not just improving them with pavement, but with permeable paving, and improving the things. I have 24 seconds, is that right? I'm sorry. I'll round it up.
I think it means 30 seconds.
30 seconds. I got 1918 going. I'm going to finish. I just wanted to say that what we brought forward and why I'd asked for a continuance is there is a vesting in the comments that we're bringing forward tonight, working with staff and the product that is in front of you that came out of and was born out of that CDAC meeting the first time and the second time.
So, Mr. Steele, you actually are done, but there may be questions for you. So let me look to the commission. Commissioner O'Donnell.
Right. Thank you.
No, I have a question, sir.
Why don't you stay at the podium and answer questions?
You were going to say something, and it certainly got my interest, but I don't know what it was, about why, again, it related to a continuance. And since Commissioner Erickson already visited that ground, it sounded like it was something new. You were saying you'd like a continuance because?
No, it was back to, he asked two pointed questions before. Was there anything different? And what is not in those two questions was, why did I want to do this? And it really was, I wanted to show to the Planning Commission that we took the comments from the CDAC seriously. The product that we've done with the staff in trying to incorporate those comments, I think, are almost every single bullet. There's been some consideration to that. And for the continuity of those comments, to have at least the two that were on that CDAC are missing tonight and still serving on the commission, to have them be able to respond that whether we responded to their questions appropriately in the direction and how it's incorporated met their expectations in their comments. There was no vote or direction, but we were trying to listen and be responsive. And that's how we think we respond to the community, in the same way we respond to them. And I thought it would benefit us to have them here.
Other questions? Thank you, Mr. Steele. There's no other questions. I think you got a copy of the staff report, and we do have copies of the minutes of the CDAC meetings, so that is before us.
Understand.
So, okay. Now it's time for members of the public to address us on this issue. I have speaker cards from 7 of you. If you'd want to talk about this project, just complete one of these cards. We keep your name and address just for our record. So you saw earlier that Ms. Mallison came up and corrected minutes. So we want to know who you are and what your concerns are. So if you'd like to speak, please give me a card. But I'm just going to go through these now. You each have 3 minutes. And I would ask, just because there's a lot of people here, if you've heard your comment made effectively and appropriately, there's no need to repeat it. So please be respectful of everyone's time. We do want to hear from you, but we don't necessarily need to hear it a whole lot of times. So with that, Kim Wilder. Okay. Mr. Trujillo or Ms. Trujillo? I have a C. Trujillo. And sir, and others that want to speak, please just adjust the microphone to you and give us your name and address.
My name is Chris Trujillo. I'm a resident at the proposed development, and I have a couple questions here. I disagree that this will be a benefit and that these additional benefits for the land are used. As a resident, I oppose the additional development due to the negative impact that far outweighs the benefits. And as you stated before, it was overzoned, so poorly thought out when they have endless funds, in my opinion. The conversion of land into urban sprawl, the infrastructure development, other anthropogenic human-caused pollutions, are changes to the characteristics of the land that are going to add to habitat degradation, fragmentation, pollution, air, noise pollution, in my opinion, Blythe adding to McMansion. They're trying to squeeze every ounce of possible square footage out of this place. Their benefits are to change everything and add, there's nothing wrong with things that are 50 years old. It adds quite charm to this town. I don't see a problem with things that are wrong that were 50 years old. The leasing office is fine. There's nothing wrong with it. Everybody can find it. The parking area that's been proposed is currently maxed out, and it should have been encompassed as being used because it is used. And in any place that I've been to, any 2-bedroom unit typically has 3 cars, and so that doesn't propose any guest parking as well. There's the adverse impact on the community and the multi-dwelling residents. The proposal will only benefit the new versus displacing those, and their method for calculating who's going to be in the below market rate is very vague, and it lacks flavor, to say the least. It doesn't have any definition, and it sounds kind of subjective and arbitrary to who they feel is fitting or be fitting for that. So, and furthermore, I wanted to inquire as to, I formally requested the planning show proof that all of the required guidelines of the town Los Gatos mandated biological research section 15.1 and must meet all guidelines as set forth to the project. The existing vegetation, the communities, the cover types of wildlife habitats, wildlife movement corridors, and their proposed removal of countless trees. Replacing the existing pool. The existing pool, according to all the residents, is quite fine. It's spacious. We don't feel a need for, it's a communal place for us. They want to propose an enclosed development that's going to be isolated, and the benefits are not there. I don't see the benefits. Replacing the vast amounts of sidewalks with new ones, how does this benefit us? Planting new landscape requires disruption of the destruction of homes of several species. We don't need new landscapes, only if you had new buildings. How is this beneficial?
Mr. Trujillo, your time is up. Thank you. Let me see if there's questions for you. Why don't you stay at the podium for a second? And I'm going to ask people in the audience, because we are doing a public hearing, it's like a quasi-judicial proceeding. We ask for respect, so we don't want applause, we don't want comments, we want respect for everybody at the podium. Thank you. Questions for Mr. Trujillo? Thank you very much, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Ann Lamborn.
Ann Lamborn, 7 Monroe Court. I've lived at 7 Monroe Court, which is on Los Gatos Creek, for 40 years. And basically, I live only a few hundred feet from this project. I'm not very aware of this project, surprisingly, and neither were my neighbors. On Monroe Court, we're very protective of the riparian corridor and very aware of it. And I, in particular, since I see more, I'm able to see more and more of the creek and the area, and I know how extraordinarily, really beautiful it is. I think we really need to pay a great deal of attention to our pristine areas of Los Gatos Creek and think about how we could use this resource in our town in a very, very special way. My neighbors are rather upset about the increased traffic and the potential increased traffic, and we are against that. I have some signatures from my neighbors, which I was able to collect this afternoon. I really don't, for some reason, we weren't really aware enough of this project, and maybe it was the story poles or for whatever reason. And as one of the commissioners mentioned, since we don't really have occasion to go to that area, we aren't so aware of it, but it could be a very, very special place for our town. I think that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Questions for Ms. Lamborn? Thank you very much. I think it's Elizabeth O'Kane. I apologize if I got it wrong.
Sleep. Oh, dear. Okay, good.
Oh, okay, thank you.
And Ms. O'Kane, if you want to go closer to your presentation, you can take that mic out and walk over there if you want to.
Oh, that's okay, that's fine, thank you. I don't believe that Sobranto Corporation cares about the heritage, the history, or the people of Los Gatos, and I believe that there's precedent for this. One more evidence that this is the case is that this was a historic mosaic, 3 stories tall, made by hand, that they allowed to fall into disrepair and then destroyed without notifying the neighborhood or the Arts Commission or anyone. They didn't try to raise any money from the neighborhood to help save it. They just destroyed it without even carefully making cuts so that pieces could be displayed. There was no damage to the oval mosaic at the bottom. This is what the wall looks like now. And there's the sign that notified the neighborhood about this project that was just recently put up. And it's where people would only drive by. You can't even walk up to it and take a look. If you do, you see this. And the date and time of this meeting was completely obscured, and I believe this was deliberate. There's the other sign at the very bottom of the property across the street where no one walks or gathers. There were no signs posted in places where people walk or gather, such as laundry rooms or mailboxes. Los Gatos has a reputation for being charming and lovely. This looks more like Santana Row to me, and I don't think that Los Gatos wants to be San Jose. From this view, common sense makes it clear that 4 more buildings on this property and 50 more units at the expense of privacy providing and noise reducing trees would bring the density far beyond high and into the region of hive. 73 trees this construction would destroy, according to the staff report. 73. This is wrong, and this is about corporate greed. 73 strong, living, healthy adult trees that provide shade, produce oxygen, filter pollutants, help control noise pollution, and store carbon to help limit the greenhouse gas effect in Los Gatos. If this project is approved, it would be an unrecoverable loss of priceless historic beauty and space of Los Gatos. This is of absolutely no benefit to this construction can make up for this loss. The architecture nearby is not bland, it's historic. and has character that this project would not fit in with. This is Town Terrace that serves the entire neighborhood as a conduit to University Avenue. And the size of this pothole proves that there's already plenty of traffic on this street. It is my understanding that the property owners have attempted the expansion here before, and Los Gatos had the foresight and wisdom to turn this down. And for the sake of the people of Los Gatos, present and future, I hope against hope that Los Gatos will stop this unnecessary and devastating plan. I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. O'Kane. Are there questions? Thank you very much. Courtney Cooper. There's actually a mic in the back if you want to use it. It's to your left. Okay, so if you want to just grab that mic out of the stand and
Testing.
there you go.
Hello. I've been in California since 2003. I was raised in the South, and there is a respect for architecture and heritage back there. And one of my great problems with Northern California has been there is no respect for history. There's no respect for architecture. Things, as soon as they seem old, are destroyed and new condominiums put in. One of the things living in Los Gatos the last 2 years that I have absolutely loved is this sense of community and continuity that goes not only with your architecture and your heritage that you seem to be protective of, but also just with the way the community is laid out. The building that I live in now, I'm a resident of Riviera Terrace, it has history, it has a setup that encourages community. As far as the pool goes, I was there just Monday with 5 different parties and all of us meeting and interacting. Some of my neighbors who I've never met before. Where I live, I would be directly affected by the construction. I'm right on the bottom of the L shape. The buildings would go up and completely block my view of the beautiful Santa Cruz Mountains that I now have from my patio now, where during summer I enjoy eating outside and listening to a babbling brook and being able to see all the neighbor kids play. I think that this new plan serves no benefit to Los Gatos. It takes away from the beauty that I see within it. And certainly as far as keeping up a continuity of the architecture and everything, it doesn't help. It's very detrimental. There is a beautiful landscaping there that flows lovely into the short walk to Vasona Park that I think shows the beauty of this area in the foothills. I see if you ripped out 73 trees, even if you replace them somewhere else, they don't do very well after being moved. They don't survive very well. Right now, you have a beautiful garden. You have a redwood tree that's older than this building. And there's nothing wrong with old. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Cooper? Thank you very much for coming down. Jeff Crichton.
Good evening. It's pronounced Crichton.
I think I got it right, but okay, Crichton.
I think some of my sentiments have already been spoken, but I'll just read a brief message I have here. My name is Jeff Crichton. I live behind the existing apartment complex close to the proposed addition to Town Terrace. Typically, over the past 4 years, I have lived on Monroe Court. I have found the tenants to be transitory, noisy, playing TV and stereos loudly late into the night with little or no regard to their neighbors. Further, and more importantly, they have been a source for abandonment and drop off their unwanted pets. Los Gatos Development should build affordable homes, not apartment complexes. Lastly, Los Gatos has a traffic problem on University Avenue, and adding apartments will only exacerbate this situation. Thank you for your consideration.
Questions for Mr. Crichton? Thank you, sir. And this one I don't know how to say. Michael Malays, Malayeeri. Are you here? Michael? Okay. Max Wilkins?
Good evening. My name is Max Wilkins, and I'm a resident of 135 Riviera Terrace. And I'm not going to take up much of your time. I'm not going to say much more than these people have to say. But as a concerned resident of Riviera Terrace, I would like to uphold the pristine environment that we have. And also, like I'm sure many of these people, we have pets and dogs, and it's definitely one of the benefits of living there is being able to walk your pets in the trees and the grass areas that are provided by the apartment complex. So in regards to that, I would like to see that we uphold the nature aspect of our complex. That's all I have to say.
Questions for Mr. Wilkins? Thank you very much. Kim Wilder.
Hello. I first want to say, this is a really tough thing for me because I've lived at Riviera Terrace for 18 years. I've raised my son there, and I'm a lifetime resident of Los Gatos. My father went to Los Gatos High School, and I didn't even know that apartments existed until till my son was about a month old, and I was looking for some housing. And I grew up in a house, and all my friends had houses and things. So it was just really a beautiful place to raise my son, and it's really, really beautiful there. And I remember when Sobrato bought Riviera Terrace, and I appreciate the fact that I'm sorry, I'm nervous, and it's a lot of emotion for me, so I apologize. But I remember when Sobrato bought Riviera Terrace, and it was really kind of tough because they bought it, and everybody's rent got raised by an enormous amount, and people had to move. There was people there that lived with family members in other apartments, and it was. I appreciate their efforts, and now I appreciate their efforts saying that they're going to offer affordable housing, but. There's many other apartment buildings that offer lower cost housing in the area down there. I especially appreciate it because I am a social worker, have been for many years. I just see that this is going to add so much more traffic, and it just kind of really breaks my heart to see the beauty of Riviera Terrace and that area and stuff, pretty much demolished. And it's just, I've seen it's been like such a place for people to go to live for years. Maybe they've been going through a divorce, or they're just waiting to have construction done to their home or something like that. It's been a beautiful place for people to go, and I just hope that Sobrato can find another place to build some affordable housing. And I'm sorry, I'm nervous, and I just see that it's going to add a lot more traffic. I see the traffic is so heavy and stuff at times, and people are parked all over, and I see it could be dangerous adding so many more apartments there. So thank you so much, and thank you.
Okay, let's see if there's questions before you sit down. Questions for Ms. Wilder? Okay, thank you very much. That is all the cards I have for members of the public. So if there's someone who hasn't spoken that would like to speak, now's the time to do it. Okay, seeing no one, I'm going to ask Mr. Steele, if you'd like to come back up. You have 3 minutes to make comments on whatever you've heard.
Thank you. I don't have a lot more to say yet. I do want to suggest one thing, though, further about the BMR units that we're offering to provide. We have every intent. As a matter of fact, on Friday before 4th of July, we did put out a quick letter to the residents and suggested within that that we would give preference to an early application for, to be submitted to the city. We wouldn't be, or excuse me, to the town. We don't administer or qualify a BMR unit. We'd be following the ordinance that the city has relative to what qualifies for low or moderate. They would be applying and verified by the city or the town that they qualify, and then we would put them on a list, and as that unit becomes available, they'd be aligned, they'd fall in as they become available. So it's not administered at all by Subrato or the property management company on site. We have every intention of not relocating anybody that is currently a resident. We're not proposing to touch the rent control units that are in place. Anybody that's there would stay under the same program they currently are. But we do want to give preference. If any of those would qualify for a low unit, we certainly want to see those go into those qualifying units first. As well as anybody that would like to move into new units, we're going to give them preference as well. So I just wanted to speak to that, and still available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Does anyone have questions, Mr. Steele? Wait a minute, Mr. Steele, Commissioner O'Donnell?
We're all familiar with, and I'm sure you've seen the Cannon Group letter.
Yes.
Commenting on the architecture, and I guess what I'd like to know, this letter is back in April, and so you've had a chance to go over it and probably respond to it. And
April of 2010, I believe.
Yes, April of 2010.
Right.
I'm just asking, perhaps as a shortcut, how many of the things that he raised have been addressed in subsequent work?
Two-part answer. Jim Guthrie, our architect, and myself have met and talked with Larry about the points. We've tried to incorporate those that we can incorporate at this level of detail, and we've committed to staff and to Larry to work with them before we do our submittal for architectural site review. And Jim, did you have any items that you want to respond to that?
Wait a minute, Mr. Steele. Do you have any follow-up that you want to ask Commissioner O'Donnell?
I think I do, but let me first say, what my understanding your answer to be, since we're not doing architectural site approval this evening, you will continue to work with staff and with Mr. Cannon, because he does raise issues such as the entries to both the lower units and the upper units.
Right.
So that is not resolved.
To Larry's total satisfaction, no, but we've committed to work with him to address how to best improve it to his liking, yes.
Okay. That was the only question I had. Thank you.
Okay.
Other questions? Commissioner Bourgeois.
Thank you, Mr. Steele. Just what you described before the questioning started about the transition plan for getting, is that written down anywhere? Is that going to be?
No, the offer that we made to staff, because we don't know when exactly we'd be in a position to start construction because of where we are in the process of getting approvals today, but that we would come up with a plan of how to manage that and market and maintain that program, submit it to staff prior to their approval and our pulling of a building permit. So it'll be a condition of being able to pull a building permit for them to be satisfied.
Okay.
One more piece. It's anticipated that at this point in time that it's about a 12-month program. We have a normal turnover of about, Wes, 10%. We're sitting 10% vacant or 5% vacant. We're always having some rollover. I wouldn't be surprised, usually in a construction project, you lose a few too, which all provides the opportunity to accelerate the units, so they might be in place actually before the project's completed, which is not the norm. You usually build a brand new project with a BMR requirement. There's a period of time that you absorb the project lease up in normal, and it would subsequently follow the building CFO.
Just a quick comment, then a second question, just for your benefit, having worked on projects similar to this in town. I know that sort of transition planning is very important to us and very important to the town council, and someone may want to see that before approvals, just based on prior experience. Right. So my next question is, it might be for your architect, but I'll pose it to you first and let you decide. One of the issues we have to decide on is neighborhood compatibility. And in the staff report, it talks a lot about adjacent land uses and heights and densities, but I would like someone to talk to me about the rationale behind the architectural style that was chosen and how it seems a very different style and type of unit for that neighborhood. And so as I'm trying to make a judgment on neighborhood compatibility, I'd like to know the thought process that went behind the design.
The type of unit that you see can take on different personalities on, if you pardon the expression, the carcass of the unit itself, the inside envelope. The outside provides, you can do a pitched roof, you can do different materials on the roof, you can do a flat roof, you can do any kind of accessory in a sense to dress up the carcass piece. In this case, the existing project is very, very simple. It's a flat roof, barely a fascia board on it, with a very flat wall. There's no articulation in the windows. There's no reliefs going back and forth. And to the degree that we could come up with something dramatically different, we could, but we didn't want it to look so odd because they didn't work together. So the flatter roof, the flat roof as you see, is complementary to the existing roofs. The window articulations are actually probably more articulation than the buildings are there. And then the next piece I thought that was very important was the ability of these particular buildings to terrace down. There's a fairly significant drop from the upper end of the property down to the creek. And what I didn't appreciate in the existing project is they came straight out as the elevations dropping of the terrain around it. They came way out, so at the beginning it's 35 feet, but by the time you get out here it's 55 feet. And then it drops down and takes off again, and it didn't really respect the adjacent properties as much as it could. And so this type of construction allows for those to drop down in different pieces and respect the terrain better, which then preserves the views and that to the degree possible.
Let me see if Commissioner Erickson has something before I ask Commissioner O'Donnell again. Okay, Commissioner O'Donnell.
I just wanted to revisit the landscaping and the removal of trees. It's gone through our arborists and all the other reviews, but just generally speaking, would you tell us again, it's been mentioned several times this evening that you're going to be taking out, I think the number was 67 trees. Would you tell us about how it's, the quality and the quality of trees being taken out, and how the loss of those healthy trees, the ones that are healthy, will be mitigated?
The town, as most municipalities, have an ordinance in place that addresses the fact that you can't always save every single tree, the health of the tree or the quality of the tree or the location of the tree. I believe in the town of Los Gatos' case, there is a formula that's required depending on the grade of the tree, the size of the tree, and whether it's a heritage tree. We approached first the site in the area that we were looking at developing as trying to identify the highest value trees first and see if we can't accommodate the highest value trees. A very clear one is as you come in at the lower entrance where the leasing office is, you'll see just to the right of that on that illustration, that's where the very tall redwood tree is. And that was a verboten. We weren't going to go there. Everything we did had to come around that. Then as we went out from that, started looking at the quality of trees and what we had to do. Those 70 trees or so will be somewhere between 2 and 3 replacement trees for every one that's going to be removed, regardless of the condition of the tree. To the degree we can put those on site, every single one of those will be on site. To the degree the water district will allow us to put the remainder into the area along the creek, we would certainly offer that. And that has to be at the discretion of the water district. And to the degree there's remainders, there's in lieu fees to pay for those. But certainly if we're buying a tree, I'd much rather have it on site and get the enjoyment of it than to put it on someone else's property or pay a fee. Did that get to your whole question? You looked like I did.
No, that's, I do understand your answer. I guess what I wonder is whether you have a present impression as to, of, let's say, 70, you use that number, it's a round number. Yeah. As I sit here, I don't know how many you think you'll actually be able to get on the site. Do you have a feeling for that?
Can you
I'm
not discuss it from the seat? So if you want to come up and identify yourself, you can give us the answer.
Miss Janet Hiddle from the Gazzardo Partnership.
Thank you very much. Yes, Janet Hiddle, Gazzardo Partnership. I did a quick count, and it's around 136 is what we have on the preliminary plan. And as we're getting it into the design development stage, could be more, could be less, depends on what we are able to do.
So for the 70 trees being removed, and keeping in mind that you're required to put in more trees, you nevertheless feel that on-site you can get 130 replacements?
Right. We're able to at this point, and I think we can probably find room for more. I think one thing, if I could add, is that a number of the trees are eucalyptus trees, and then a number of the trees that are being removed are eucalyptus, and we're also saving some eucalyptus, but it's not that we're not taking out, we're trying to save oaks as best we can, and those are around the creek mostly, and the sycamores that are along the creek, we're really trying to protect those in particular. So a number of trees that are being removed aren't necessarily of the best health.
Okay, thank you very much.
Other questions? I think not for you, thank you. Mr. Steele, I have some questions. I'm concerned about the elimination of the landscape buffer and otherwise buffer between the creek, which is a major asset of the town of Los Gatos, and the proposed development. If, for whatever reason, this body or the town council could ask you to avoid that area in your development, how would you answer me if I was to say, I want you to move everything back from the creek and preserve a buffer between your development and the creek?
Can you point to the area you're concerned about?
I'm just concerned about, I'm just looking at the staff report. I can't necessarily see in this picture because I'm not so good with that. But where your development is going to come down toward the creek, and your landscape architect was just talking about the sycamores along the creek. If I'm running along or riding along the creek trail, I don't want to see your buildings. I want to see the sycamores. So I just want you to address how you're going to hopefully eliminate or alleviate that problem.
Well, first, as I suggested with the trees, there were certain boundaries of areas we would do and look at and areas that we wouldn't. And in the particular case along the creek, we are respecting the existing fence line that's in place today. Everything on the creek side of the fence line, we aren't going beyond the fence line to touch, with the exception of a mitigation that was proposed for our project, and that is most of the vegetation that's on the creek side of the fence is non-native, and actually it's invasive. And one of the mitigations proposed is to put I believe it's a 5-year program in place of eradicating and removing the non-native species within the creek, primarily ivy, and I don't know all the species, but there's quite a bit of ivy that is attacking some of the more native species that might have vegetated the area. So putting that plan in place again, under the impression that the Water District would accept that mitigation. Second is the Water District has an easement across the lower parking lot area currently that restricts it from having any structures within it. And we've respected that property line, so all the buildings, replacement and new buildings there are outside of that area. So the new buildings aren't in the setback from the creek at all. Then 2/3 of the area at the bottom towards the creek on the right-hand side of that is already paved and within the fence line. And then the last 20% going up towards the upper right-hand corner is still within the fence line, but is currently used for active activities within the grassed area around the pool.
And I want to ask you about a completely different subject, which is community benefit. The proposed community benefits of the project have been summarized for us in our staff report, and they essentially boil down to affordable units for the town of Los Gatos and then a whole lot of things on your property. So when I think of community benefit, I think about a benefit to the entire community, not to Riviera Terrace, although that'd be nice, but I don't consider that to be a community-wide benefit. So can you give me a little background on how you see these things being a benefit to the community at large?
Sure. Well, I don't want to underestimate the value of a community benefit relative to a below-market rent unit within the town of Los Gatos. If you go back and follow the state density bonus, in actuality, we're providing more BMR units than is currently required. In addition to that, the offer of a BMR unit within the new units is above and beyond the requirement of the state density bonus. Third item, which wasn't expounded on within the staff report, is we've also offered to the town, if they prefer, the units that we're providing as BMR units, we would also allow the city to consider buying that affordability down on those units even farther, which is at a very discounted price. So to the degree the town has certain goals of affordability, we're providing an opportunity for them to meet some of those units that they can't provide within their community very readily in this project, if they so desire.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Steele? Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
With that, I'm going to close the public portion of the hearing. I'm going to look to the commission for questions to staff, comments, and/or a motion. Commissioner O'Donnell.
I wanted to make some comments because people are here wondering what we're going to do, and I don't know what we're going to do either. That's why we don't discuss this outside the meeting. But I wanted to be clear that we're proceeding under a state law that tells us what essentially we have to do. And the wisdom of the state law is always open to question. But the purpose of the state law, which is to make communities better balanced, is a good purpose. So whether you agree with I don't like the state telling localities how to do everything, which they seem to like to do. But the idea of having Los Gatos be a balanced community and have people be able to afford to live here is something not only the state thinks is a good idea, but I personally think is a good idea. So it's easier for me when I deal with that. So in deciding what we do tonight, we have to consider, one, what is the state law and what does it require? And it is fairly clear to me that when we discuss community benefit, for example, the community benefit we have tonight is unusual because we have so many units, which I've been on this commission now for 8 years, and to get 2 units, 3 units, 4 units is pulling teeth very hard. And when we did our general plan this year, we have to promise the state how many units we're going to develop over the next 10 years. We don't do real well at that, and you can imagine why. It's very, very difficult. We have an offer here, which is a very, very good offer as far as I'm concerned, and I consider that to be a very, very strong community benefit. Secondly, the applicant, because of state law, gets to essentially request 2 concessions from us. And the only concession they've asked for us is this parking concession, as I understand it. Now, number one, they meet the state standards. My observation is this applicant could have tried to drive a harder bargain. Whether they would have been successful in that, I don't know. But I will say, when I first came into this, I'm familiar with the project, with your beautiful place there, the trees. It's a lovely, lovely spot. But you know, everybody who ever comes before us says, do your below market somewhere else. We all think it's a great thing, but don't do it here. So I just want people to understand the framework we will be within this evening as we discuss this will not be what the local government says, even if the local government agrees with it. It will be what we are required to do by law at our peril, because if we don't do what is required, we are subject to lawsuits, attorneys' fees, for the other side, not just our own. So I just want to throw that out as context, and I'm looking forward to hearing from my fellow commissioners to see what their impression of this is. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments or a motion? Commissioner Erickson.
A couple of quick questions for staff. If my recollection is correct, in the goals in the general plan to achieve affordable or below-market housing, however, whichever one was language the one was used, in the plan for the town to achieve the goal, these particular units were not in the count in the general plan, is that correct?
That is correct. It was not on the housing sites inventory.
So these would be in addition to what otherwise would have been in the plan, potentially?
Yes.
Then there's some concern expressed by some of the members of the public about not knowing about the product. Could you review for us the notification, that, as you understand it, that went to the residents and to the neighbors in the immediate area?
As the applicant commented, letters were sent to each resident of Riviera Terrace, advising them of the proposal and including some general information and typical questions and answers that that's sort of a frequently asked question. We asked the applicant to post the signs at the two entries, and so that's why they were where they were. Staff suggested that they be at the entries so that people coming and going from the project would see them and have another, notification, by seeing the large sign as they came and went from the project. The town sent out written notice to property owners and residents within 300 feet of the perimeter of the property. Those don't go out till about 10 days in advance, so that's not a lot of notice, but that is what's required by state law, and that's what we do for every project.
Thank you.
Other comments or a motion? Commissioner Bourgeois.
I'll make a few comments. I'm not sure if I'm in the minority or not here for a motion. So one of my biggest concerns with this project, I appreciate Commissioner O'Donnell's comments. This is going to result in a big increase in intensity of this whole area, not just the project, but the entire town terrace area. Having a hard time separating my experience living there with this traffic report. I read the traffic report and how 333 additional peak hour trips is not going to affect what I found to be an already pretty difficult intersection at Town Terrace and University. I'm having trouble resolving that, but I think that aside, the project mitigated neg deck, and this was kind of solidified for me with comments from the Water District, admits that they are not in compliance with the Water District's guidelines for land use near streams on 3 accounts. Does not provide a buffer between the new facilities and the riparian zone, would result in the removal of native vegetation within the riparian zone, and would place new paved and active recreational areas within a riparian corridor. So to me, that's almost a non-starter for saying there's no significant impact and recommending approval of the mitigated neg deck. Having spent time there, I understand the qualitative assessment of that aspect of the riparian corridor. Yes, it is heavily impacted. It's got invasive species. We've got a sound wall and a trail on the other side of it. But to me, that's all the more reason to have a buffer there if it's already a very impacted corridor there. So the project is admittedly not in compliance with a policy that we've adopted, which is the guideline for land use near streams. So that's a huge concern for me. I'm in favor of upgrades to this facility. I'm in favor of putting below market price or affordable units here. I just think the way they've pushed them all the way to the riparian corridor is unacceptable to me. And I really have a hard time believing with all of that open space that they couldn't find space to put story poles for one of the units. I think that would have done a lot to inform the neighbors and give everyone a really better feel of what's going to happen here. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Commissioner Bourgeois. I will weigh in. I asked the question of Mr. Steele regarding the riparian corridor because I share your concern. It seems to me that some more thought, and I realize you've been at this for a long time, but some more thought could go into a site plan so that you can get construction and pavement and everything else away from the creek. I realize, and I'm also agree with Commissioner O'Donnell that affordable housing in Los Gatos is a good thing. I think this is actually a place that could absorb it, as opposed to, for example, Ditto's Lane, where we're going to basically bulldoze the creek. But there's a lot of the same issues here. I think this area could absorb it better. I'm not saying it could absorb it perfectly, but better. But I do share Commissioner Bourgeois' concern about the riparian corridor and the mitigated negative declaration. And I have a concern about the community benefit, which I do think we have discretion over. So I might want to see, I don't know what other people have in mind, I might want to see us asking the applicant to address those issues specifically and perhaps come back to us with a different site design or tell us why those concerns in the riparian corridor have been taken care of. That would be my view. So with those comments, is there further comments and or motion? Commissioner Erickson.
I'd like to ask the chair's permission to reopen the public hearing and ask Mr. Steele to come forward to say if we were to adopt such a, or put forward such a continuance, what length of time that they believe they might need to address those issues.
So I will grant that, but Mr. Steele, I want you to answer only the question of how long will it take you? I don't want you to address site plan, riparian corridor, community benefit. Only if we were to do that, how long would you need? And you should come to the podium and answer the question. If you want to consult with your team, that's fine.
To ask that question again.
If we were to decide that we wanted you to come back, having rethought your site plan to get construction and pavement and impervious surfaces away from the creek and address the issues that were raised by Commissioner Bourgeois and the Santa Clara Valley Water District, and for me to further refine your community benefit, although we do acknowledge that affordable housing is a benefit, but to refine that, if we wanted you to rethink those, or to tell us why you've already complied with your current site plan to any kind of concerns regarding the riparian corridor, how long would you need to do that?
I think I'd have to only address the latter of your two options, and I could do it at your next meeting on August 10th.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to close the public hearing again. And Commissioner Erickson, did you have a comment in light of that?
I would like to make a motion that we continue this item to August 10th and ask the applicant to address the concerns about the site that have been expressed by the Commission tonight.
Is there a second? I'll second it. We can make comments on the motion, but there's a motion on the floor to continue to August 10th, and it's been seconded. Commissioner O'Donnell.
Two things. One, the community benefit is ethereal. We've asked for Christmas lights as a community benefit. It is a very difficult thing to figure out what a community benefit is, as everybody sitting on this side of the table.
But before you go further, Commissioner Erickson's motion was only for site, not community benefit.
And I'm commenting on that, so if you indulge me. As far as the site is concerned, I've heard no testimony other than what we have on the plans as to the setback before the riparian corridor. We've read reports here on the riparian corridor. I have, I guess, missed the objection of the agencies that normally would be concerned about the riparian corridor. So if we're going to be crystal clear here, if we're not dealing with community benefit, because the motion doesn't include that, if we're talking about addressing the corridor, it isn't clear to me that the testimony this evening is clear on what the distance is at the moment, and therefore what it is we would be comfortable with. And I suppose if we really want to get something good on comments, it would be very helpful if we knew what we're asking for. So I would ask staff if they could comment now on the present setbacks as proposed, so we can figure out what we're driving at. In other words, if you have a 50-foot setback, somebody might say, I want a 100-foot setback. But I don't know, can you tell us what kind of setbacks we're talking about?
Santa Clara Valley Water District has not requested a specific setback. There's an existing maintenance easement that comes out beyond the existing fence over the paved area. And the one request that they had when the applicant met directly with that agency was that they not put any structures in there. They did agree to allow the paved area. So there were originally some carports planned, and those were removed. The district has indicated, staff at the district has indicated that the paved parking area is acceptable. So we actually were surprised when we received the comments to the MND, and that's why one of the things we did was had our environmental consultant go back and respond to each of those comments. And that's one of the addendums that was attached to the staff report. So there's not a specific setback that was requested, and we are keeping all structures out of their easement. Now, I think there is the commission has the discretion to say that maybe, as Commissioner Bourgeois stated, perhaps the buffer's not great enough. Perhaps there needs to be more planting in that area versus hardscape.
Are you aware of, as the plan is presently proposed, any violation of any rule, statute, or ordinance of the town of Los Gatos?
The district did state that they felt that there wasn't strict adherence to the guidelines, but they didn't cite any specific guideline. So we'd have to probably go back and see if we could get some more specific direction from their staff as to what guidelines they feel aren't being complied with.
Thank you.
Okay, there is a motion on the floor. Commissioner Bourgeois.
I'm not going to support the motion because I think by the response that they can be ready in 2 weeks, I think we're going to get more explanation, and I feel like I have enough information in front of me to not be comfortable with the design the way it currently is. Our consultant stated that it is not compliant with the guidelines for land use near streams. The Water District concurs. And actually, I think the staff report is actually a little misleading when it says that, development will not, proposed development will not be located any closer to the creek than the existing pavement. Well, the existing pavement only isn't one portion. There's a big lawn that they are extending hardscape into that is parallel to the extent of pavement, but it is not paved now. So we're paving new area underneath the riparian corridor. So to me, this, and there is not a specific, line item in the guidelines that says you must have this. It says you must do an assessment based on biological resources, and the mitigation that's being proposed is removal of some non-native species, which is great, but it also sounds like it's not necessarily all on this property. So there seems to be a lot of difficulty in getting, in meeting that guideline. So I'm not going to support the motion for that reason.
Okay, let's just call the question and see where we are, and then we'll move forward. So there's a motion on the floor to continue this matter to August 10th. It's by Commissioner Erickson, seconded by Commissioner Jensen. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? So that motion passes. The matter is going to be continued to August 10th at our hearing. In favor, Commissioner Jensen, Commissioner Erickson, Commissioner O'Donnell. Opposed, Commissioner Bourgeois. So I don't think there will be further notice. Is that correct, Ms. Bailey?
That is correct. There will be no further notice.
So thank you all who are interested in this. Please note and tell friends and neighbors that it will next be heard on August 10th. Thank you very much. Okay, item 2, thank you very much for your patience. That is conditional use permit application U-11-006 for 91, 101, and 109 West Main Street. Again, this is a matter that the commission will consider only for a recommendation to the town council. We do not take final action here tonight. Is there a staff report?
There will be. Let us get the project planner on this.
Here we go.
Good evening, Chair, Commissioners. There are 5 commercial spaces at the subject property. There is an existing conditional use permit, or CUP, that covers 2 businesses, Los Gatos Roasting at 91 and 101 West Main Street, and Los Gatos Gourmet at 109 West Main Street. The subject application would modify this existing conditional use permit. The existing CUP allows a delicatessen, wine bar, and specialty retail use at 109 West Main Street. The applicant is requesting approval to allow a restaurant with indoor and outdoor seating, beer and wine service, and modified hours of operation to operate in this space. The existing business at 91 and 101 West Main, Los Gatos Roasting, would reduce the intensity of its use. The applicant is proposing 38 indoor seats and 6 outdoor seats. Proposed hours are Sunday through Thursday, 11 a.m. to 10 p.m., and Friday and Saturday, 11 a.m. to 11 p.m. The alcoholic beverage policy requires the deciding body to make specific findings to allow alcoholic beverage service past 10 p.m. The alcoholic beverage policy also strongly discourages new applications for restaurants with separate bars. The proposed floor plan shows bar-type seating at a food counter and a chef's circle. However, the applicant states that there is no standalone bar use proposed for the space. Staff has included the standard condition that meal service is required with alcoholic beverage service. The applicant is proposing to make food service available during all hours of operation. The deciding body should consider whether making food service available as opposed to requiring meal service with alcoholic beverage service meets the intent of the alcoholic beverage policy. Ordinance 2021 discourages the displacement of retail uses by restaurant uses by requiring a careful review of all applications for new restaurants in the C2 zone. When the existing CUP allowing the delicatessen was reviewed, the town found that the deli use was complementary to the existing retail grocery use and therefore would not conflict with this ordinance. However, the proposed use would maintain about 25% of the existing retail area, which appears insufficient to maintain a retail use. The subject application triggers the requirement for community benefit. The applicant has made a few community benefit offers and most recently has offered an electric car charger station. The town has grants for 2 charging stations, and at this time, the offers may create adverse impacts or contribute to an item that has already been satisfied. As conditioned, the project would meet the alcoholic beverage policy and the standards for outdoor seating. Although the project would expand an ancillary restaurant use, staff recommends soft denial, given that the proposed retail area is only about 25% of the existing retail space, and therefore the project would displace a use that is primarily retail. The deciding body should consider whether the project conflicts with Ordinance 2021 and whether or not the community benefit would outweigh the traffic impact. The Planning Commission shall make a recommendation to the Town Council, who will be the final deciding body. This concludes staff presentation, and staff is available for any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Savage. Any questions? Commissioner O'Donnell.
If I understand this correctly, the proposal is to modify an existing conditional use permit.
Yes.
And there's going to be a Dutch door between 2 different uses so that they can have one CUP. Is that right?
Correct.
And if in fact they had a door there, they couldn't have one CUP, a real
Correct.
door. Thank you.
Other questions? I have a question about community benefit, and it's more of a general question. We often have a specific community benefit that is proposed to us. Do we have to decide, especially if we're making a recommendation, on precisely what the community benefit is going to be? Or do we have to identify a range of benefits that then the ultimate deciding body could decide whether or not it makes sense or not? Do we have to say yay or nay to a particular thing?
No, you do not. We can hear more from the applicant tonight on the community benefit, and if there is several alternatives, you can just put your, make a discussion and on how you feel about each of those benefits, and then forward those comments on to town council.
Okay, at this time, I'd like to call the applicant forward, and as in the previous hearing, you'll have 5 minutes, either yourself or your team, and please identify yourself for the record.
Yes, hello, my name is Lisa Rohr. I'm the co-owner of Chin Chin Restaurant in Los Gatos and the applicant for Pizza Simpatico. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of this new CUP. Our concept, Pizza Simpatico, is about bringing people together vis-a-vis the food and wine experience, and about building a simpatico relationship with town and our Main Street neighbors. We propose a mix of casual dining, wine bar, and retail. This new concept with a retail and cafe mix is economically viable, whereas the current Los Gatos Gourmet concept is not economically viable. My partner, Pat Romano, and I are enhancing the existing Los Gatos business model by adding increased retail opportunity for a wider selection of wine, cheese, salumi, and for the ability to properly compete with the new cheese shop that was recently approved, Fromage. The new CUP gives us the ability to serve customers within the 109 Main Street space without having to rely on the Los Gatos Roasting Company space for seating. We plan on expanding the existing food menu to capture more customers and a wider demographic to draw more attention to Main Street merchants. As well as running Chin Chin, a successful Los Gatos restaurant, I also have proven success in the retail space as a former manager in the specialty department of Whole Foods. Experience in actually increasing retail sales. I have demonstrated a proven ability to create a successful food and wine experience at Chin Chin, which has gained accolades from top media sources such as the San Jose Mercury News, Gentry Magazine, San Francisco Magazine, and Sunset Magazine. This press draws positive attention to Los Gatos and thus helping establish Los Gatos as a food and wine destination. It's very important to note that the current space is only utilizing 1/3 of the space that's dedicated to retail. And also, I might also wanted to add that we plan to design the space with eco-friendly materials, just as we have with Chin Chin, and to keep the historic nature of the building. Thank you.
Questions for Ms. Rohr? Commissioner Bourgeois?
Thank you, Ms. Rohr. You used the term wine bar in describing what you're proposing, and yet your application says there is no new standalone bar. Can you resolve that for me? And specifically, can you show me on the site plan where alcohol service is going to take place and how?
Sure, if I could provide some context for that. The current Los Gatos Gourmet space is a deli and a wine bar. There is no standalone wine bar per se, a physical space. And so when I use the term wine bar, I'm not referring to a physical space per se, a bar where you come up. I'm referring to the fact of having different wine options available on the menu. For instance, tastes, flights, glasses, and bottles. Currently, the space, every Friday there is a wine bar component at the Los Gatos Gourmet. So we're just taking what's already existing there and augmenting it. And the physical space that we'll have is not a bar per se, but a food counter where people can come up and order off the menu and order wine bar type items like flights, taste, wine, bottle.
So it's a food counter where alcohol will be served?
As it will be an option on the menu, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
I want to make sure that I understand the physical situation.
Yes.
I'm at the coffee roasting every day, but I'm not at the delicatessen all that often. But it does appear that not all of the available space of the present delicatessen is used for any purpose that the eye can see. I'm not saying it isn't used, but you can't see it. If I understand your proposal, you're going to expand the visual usable open space?
Correct.
And what I heard you say was that of the present space of the delicatessen, 1/3 is used for retail?
That's correct.
Now, I don't know how many square feet that 1/3 is applied to, but is it applied to the smaller space that exists today versus the larger space which will exist when you change the configuration?
Well, currently the configuration when you walk into the Los Gatos Gourmet, on the right side is cheese and salumi and sandwiches that you can order to go. And all that will be incorporated into the new plan under food counter, so that won't go away. To the left is wine retail, so wine bottles and the option to get wines by the glass. So that already exists in the Los Gatos Gourmet. And then there's, as you walk further, there's a whole bean section, which Terry Hope was using and is now moving down and consolidating to the 2 units below. So that space, there will not be anything there. There's also 2 big storage units that are really not being used. So when I say that only 1/3 is being used for retail, it's because there's a lot of unused space that we want to convert into usable space.
Okay, my question perhaps was even simpler than that, although that was a very helpful answer. I'm just wondering, if somebody says, I've got 1/3 of my space in retail, I have to know essentially 1/3 of what? And I don't know whether the measurement is, because when you walk in there and you see the counter, and right behind the counter is a wall, and right behind the wall there's some room. So when you say 1/3, are you talking about from that wall forward, not including the back space?
When I say 1/3 is being used, I'm talking from the moment you walk into the space all the way up to where the cash register is. That's being utilized for retail.
Okay,
That's 1/3.
and when if you were approved, you would tear out the counter, the existing counter, you'd go all the way back to the wall, the supporting wall, and then you're going to have tables outside, as I understand it.
Yes.
So if you had the same square footage of retail, the percentage would go down, right? Instead of having 1/3, just definitionally, you'd have less than 1/3.
Well, we're going to look at ways to augment the retail. The counter is not, in a sense, going away. A new food counter, which incorporates the cheese and the salumi, is going to be there in place of the cold case. So that's going to be there. The wine is still going to be there. It's going to be incorporated in displays throughout the cafe. So that does not go away. So unfortunately, I have to disagree with staff that we're going to be displacing retail, because the fact of the matter is we are not.
Well, on a square footage basis, you absolutely are, aren't you?
We are, but what we're doing is we're going to take the existing retail and put it throughout the restaurant, the cafe. And then we're going to have other opportunities to purchase the retail and be more aggressive about selling the retail than what is currently in place.
Thank you.
Other questions? I actually have a question. The first is about just your floor plan. The staff report wants us to consider whether it's a standalone bar. I'll tell you that when I look at the floor plan, I look at a modern restaurant that has a community table and it has a counter where you can sit and eat if you don't want to sit at a table and you walk in by yourself. To me, that's not a standalone bar, but I want to hear you address what your concept is in the seating and the floor plan.
Sure. Well, looking at other restaurants, including our own, we've seen that there's a lot of single people that come. Maybe their spouse is out of town or they want to grab a bite to eat, and they don't want to call attention to themselves and sit at a table for one. And the bar area or the food counter area, or just being at the counter, it's kind of what I would call the action seat. You get to see what's going on, and you don't feel alone, and it's a good opportunity to meet other people in town that you may not have had the experience to meet. So it has, in my opinion, a community benefit, and that's why you see 2 different areas of counter seating in the space.
And my next question is, what's your price point or anticipated price point for the food that you're going to be selling, pizzas? We have a lot of high-end restaurants in town, but not a lot of low-end, so
Yeah.
where are you going to be?
Well, We're looking to the low to mid range. I mean, this is really about small plates and casual dining. This isn't going to be on the scale that Chin Chin is. Chin Chin is more casual, possibly 1 foot into the fine dining category. So we're looking more for very casual, so our price point is going to be much lower, and it's going to be a smaller, simpler menu.
Commissioner Bourgeois, are you signaling? Okay. Any other questions for Ms. Rohr? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And you will have 3 minutes when people have finished talking. My first card is from Lisa Bryant.
Hi, excuse me, I'm Lisa Bryant, and I live at 150 Blueberry Hill Drive here in beautiful Los Gatos. And I've been a loyal patron of Los Gatos Gourmet, where I frequently enjoyed the wine tasting, along with buying salami and cheese and meeting a lot of new people. I've been in the area for 4 years now and have met great people. I'm very excited about a European-style cafe coming to that area, where food is prepared by Chin Chin's chef, Chris. If you have been able to eat at Chin Chin's, the food's fabulous. So I can only imagine what he can bring in a pizza in small plates, along with Lisa's knowledge of wine for purchase and being able to taste before buying is exciting me too, because I would rather buy it here than in Bevmo and Campbell. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Questions for Ms. Bryant? Oh, thanks. Scott Anderson.
Good evening. My name is Scott Anderson. I am the owner and publisher of Discover Los Gatos and Los Gatos Discovery Map. So I have about 100 local small business clients. About 65 of them are Los Gatos businesses. Lisa's business is a client. I have so my perspective on this issue is more from the land use and benefit of the downtown retail area and the health of the downtown area. So as I look at, there were 4 points that seem salient to me. One is Lisa is a proven and successful restaurateur. I live in Willow Glen, and my next door neighbor has become a religious advocate of Chin Chin's, their favorite restaurant in Los Gatos these days, and they're foodies. So I think the opportunity for her to make a success out of a new formula and bring something special to the downtown is highly likely. It's a great concept. She'll create a popular eatery. And I think what will happen is it'll bring more people to that section of Main Street. There are a lot of retail businesses there now, and I think it'll benefit them all. I think it'll increase the traffic. It'll be more of a hip place. It'll be a place for people to come and hang out, and the retailers will definitely benefit. 3, as I read the proposal, and this is probably something you guys will delve into, it appeared to me that the actual amount of available retail space will not diminish from what it is today. The restaurant size will increase, but the retail size will not decrease. So it doesn't seem like a net loss. 4th, it does seem consistent, her application seems consistent to me with many recent food service expansions. Restaurant James Randall and Gardino's come to mind. So it appears that under the right circumstances, these are decisions that City Council is making under the right circumstances, and economic vitality and community benefit and reasonable land use seem to be the criteria they use. This seems to meet all those from my point of view. So I support the approval of this application for the general benefit of Los Gatos.
Questions for Mr. Anderson? Thank you, sir. Jay Pruzansky.
Hi, my name is Jay Pruzansky. I live at 16334 Ridgecrest, and I've been a long-term resident of Los Gatos, but I had grown up in New York City, travel a lot, spend a lot of time in a lot of downtown areas, and appreciate a lively and what goes into having a downtown that you like to walk around. I have 3 daughters, teenage, a wife. All of us are well-fed. We try to support the towns and places we live. And that being said, I have a vested interest in seeing Los Gatos thrive. Recently, I've been seeing lots of communities where retail stores have gone out. As we know, the nature of retail is changing with the internet and also with the recession. You know, I'm not going to be redundant and talk about how wonderful Chin Chin is and what a great job Lisa's done with making a venue that's a comfortable place to go, that draws people, becomes a destination location, which I can only imagine that will happen at this spot on Main Street. But I think 2 points that haven't really been made are, one is, because I live on Ridgecrest, I come down Main Street, North Santa Cruz Avenue in the evenings, and once it gets dark there, it's a really dark area. In fact, there's, if you want to find parking, you know, after dark, you know, that whole corner where the post office is, Main Street, there's usually a lot of parking there because it's really empty there. People aren't walking there. And even before Lisa had told me she was going in there, driving through there, it looked like that area was begging for some reason for people to walk there and bring some light to that area. So I think just having a destination location, bringing people there, will brighten up that area and get people walking. The other is just, again, having somebody who's been successful, who knows how to be successful, and with the changing nature of towns. I mean, just walk through downtown Santa Cruz right now, and even downtown Palo Alto, and see storefronts empty. I think that we have to bet on people who can deliver. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Thank you. Sam Rohde? R-O-H-D-E? No? Terry Hope? And I don't see her anymore.
She had to close Jazz in the plat.
Okay. She was here, for the record. Fred Gerbino?
Good evening, I'm Fred Gerbino. I live on 116 Alta Heights Court with my wife, who's here, Evelyn. We've lived there for 10 years. We, before I was injured 3 months ago, walked into town at least 3 evenings every week. And we walked from Alta Heights Court down to Main Street and do a loop down North Santa Cruz and back to University. During the walks, we've come to become familiar with the operation at the Los Gatos Gourmet, not just the delicatessen, but the Friday wine tastings. I've got to know Kevin Sheehy, who our veterinarian who pours wine there on Friday nights, very knowledgeable, very fun. Got to know Lisa, super knowledgeable about not just high-end wines, but very reasonably priced wines. And that's something that I see as a benefit from somebody who likes wine and doesn't like to have to pay an arm and a leg for the wines that you see out there in the masses. Lisa's operation at Chin Chin has already been addressed. Between Lisa Rohr, John Hannigan, who's here in support of the application, Sue Farwell, and Terry Hope, who was here, what we have is over 100 years of actual personal experience of people who have succeeded in this town. And it is a rarity to succeed in any restaurant business. So what we have here is a unique mix of individuals in support of this application that I consider rare, and I think that should be taken into consideration when weighing all the options and deciding whether to accept the recommendation. I would suggest that the Commission respectfully reconsider the advice to have a soft denial on this application based on what has been said and what you will hear. And from my personal experience, Christopher Schloss is a creative genius, and I can attest that personally, and I really look forward to seeing what he can do there. And it's got all the backing, it's got all the components for success, and I look forward to being able to dine there. Thank you.
Questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Hannigan?
Good evening. My name is John Hannigan at 440 San Benito. We also have a restaurant called CB Hannigan's. It's at 208 Bachman, and we sell pizza. So the idea of Lisa selling pizza is going to be competition for us, but I think it's good competition because she does an excellent job and is a good operator. I wouldn't be standing here if it was taking up retail space, and I don't think this is the case here. I think she's using 1/3 of her building, and I think it was a poor decision on Terry's part not to use more of her shop. For the price of doing business these days is awful hard, as everybody knows. And for the last 40 years, we've been doing it, and I can say right now it's harder now than ever was before to make a business work. So in order for Los Gatos Gourmet to work, there has to be some changes. And I think Lisa's plan is wise and good, and I think she's thought it through pretty well as far as a good operator. I do not think she takes away retail space, but I think she does add to it. I think as Mr. O'Donnell said, that the space will increase towards the back, getting away more from the storage in the office area and utilize that more for whether it's either restaurant or retail. I think it could be a heck of a spot. So usually I would be against a new restaurant coming to town, but this is really the Los Gatos Gourmet. It has been here. She is a good operator. And I like the fact of trying to do business with good operators. So I would like the people coming into town. I think Lisa presents a good challenge for CB Hannigan's. We work in conjunction with her and trying to make Los Gatos Gourmet succeed, because the more good businesses we have in town by local people, I think the better it is. So I'm all for it. Any questions?
You took my line. Any questions?
The pizza?
Thank you. Chris Schloss.
Hi, my name is Chris Schloss. I'm currently the executive chef at Chin Chin Wine Barn Restaurant here in Los Gatos, and the proposed chef for the new project, Pizza Simpatico. I graduated from Los Gatos High School. I'm very familiar with this town. I've cooked abroad for 10 to 12 years, and I'm proud to say that I'm back home. I've always loved the community and the people that support it. It's a pleasure for me to be able to share what I do here in Los Gatos. I'm not here because of my involvement. I'm here because I truly care about this project. I'd like to share you a little bit about my philosophy for the culinary side of the project. Our concept is to include a menu focusing on Italian-inspired small plates, 6 gourmet pizzas, gluten-free options, and Italian desserts. We will feature coffee service featuring Los Gatos Roasting Company. We will continue to sell artisan cheese, local and house-made charcuterie, gourmet sandwiches, and wine both on our menu and to take away. With takeout in mind, the concept for the food also provides an outlet for meals to take home, to include a variety of different options. The menu will evolve with the times and constantly change to create a new dining experience each time you visit. The Italian-focused cuisine will be a reflection of how local ingredients should be used correctly, and kind of like a shadow of what is available in our own local farmers market. Menu items will be dictated by what's seasonal. Seasonally driven plates, restaurants have been the most exciting and congenial way to eat these days. And in my mind, there's nothing like it in this area. And I'll conclude with that. Many conversations and urging from other chefs in the area have inspired me to do something that is totally unique for this town, much like Chin Chin, as we're all looking for something new. My ultimate goal for moving back to this town was not only to sustain a successful business, but to build a network of young talent who need a place to display their skills. I strongly feel that this project would improve the culinary scene of Los Gatos. Looking forward to creating something unique and different, something people that can talk about. And I'm committed to making this a success and becoming a culinary presence in this wonderful town. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Thank you. Kevin Sheehy?
Thanks. I'm Kevin Sheehy. I'm actually the wine buyer at Los Gatos Gourmet currently the last 2.5 years. So my role there has been buying the wines, and then Friday nights I've been the one that's been orchestrating the tastings. So I feel pretty comfortable the last 2.5 years that I've got to know my clientele. And I wanted to address specifically Mr. O'Donnell's question about the square footage. I can't tell you how many times customers that come regularly say, what about that office space back there? Would it be great if we could just sit down and enjoy our wine and sit at a table? What's up with that office space? So when I look at currently how we're operating at a mix of retail and casual cafe dining currently, but we're only using that small portion where you first walk in currently. And I've witnessed the turnover and unfortunately the failure of a lot of the retail shops in that current area over the last couple years. And so I believe that expanding the existing model that's currently in place and even will actually show an expansion in retail because of that unused square footage where the offices are currently taking up. So 3 decades ago, I think Terry Hope had a great idea of bringing a new idea into that main street of Los Gatos. I mean, it's called Main Street, and when any town you go to, you expect that's what's happening, that's where the happening spot is, Main Street. And like Mr. Germino commented, I think lately in the evening time, that's really been a source of a slow foot traffic. Terry Hope's three decades ago had a great idea and really made that a hub for people gathering and meeting together at her coffee roasting company. 3 years ago, Lisa Rohr entered the picture and brought in a new vitality and a new energy on the opposite side of downtown, and she's been a proven success in that area. Terry Hope and Lisa Rohr have been working together, both the community, Jazz in the Plaza, Music in the Park, and having these two visionary women side by side with a concept where they're supporting each other's business, I think is going to be a win-win, not only for the Los Gatos residents, but the greater Silicon Valley community. I'm cognizant of the fragile nature of the retail, displacement of retail, but I'd urge you to consider this proposal in the sense that I think we got that perfect balance of energy, experience, and the history of success with both Terry Hope and Lisa Rohr working together. And I'll answer any questions you have.
Questions? Thank you. Okay, here goes. Pierluigi Olivero.
Good evening, Planning Commissioners. I just want to say I'm an adjacent town resident who admires the business district of the town of Los Gatos and don't have a financial stake, but I am a consumer that comes to Los Gatos and enjoys the unique variety of restaurants you have and businesses. You know, you do have a trait of having unique businesses. You're not very much a corporate chain, and I think the Chin Chin or the variety of other unique restaurants offer something unique, and people come for that. Clearly, this does not have the complexities that you faced before with density and height and the riparian corridor. This is really the simplistic idea of allowing someone to risk their capital and their ability to open up a new area to continue the vibrancy of the Los Gatos Town District. I know there's this idea of, well, let's manage X amount of retail for the balance in the town, but the reality is that that's in flux and that's changing. Consumers are continuing, and we're seeing the state grapple this with trying to tax internet commerce. And I think what we're trying to do, or what I perceive to be happening here, is the ability to offer another unique place and have people enjoy that. And I think you only create more of a nexus for people to come out in your town. I think it's a good thing. Looking at your staff report, it's amazing to me that Chin Chin has had 0 calls for service. Having worked in the restaurant industry for 20 years, it's really difficult to achieve that because as responsible as an owner can be, someone could still make a mistake, but this manager, owner is very vigilant in making sure that none of those things happen. And I think that's a nice pedigree to bring forward. And the other item, yeah, just on a planning commission standpoint, you offer recommendations to your council as a policy level. I would say this offers the amenities that you would like in the town of Los Gatos. It's not, we're not opening a nightclub or discotheque here. This is a place with food that has a moderate late night hours, and I think it's a good recommendation. Thank you.
Questions? Thank you. Jason Farwell.
Good evening, Commissioners. Jason Farwell, 140 Victory Lane. I'm here just representing the landlord group. I'm one of the owners of the building. And I just wanted to, I'm not going to waste your time reiterating all the other comments that have preceded me. I think they were all excellent and on point. We're big fans of Lisa. She's clearly an established quantity here in town, very responsible. We've had Terry Hope in this location for, well, I think since 1980, so over 30 years. And we're sorry to see Terry go from this particular location, but we're so excited to have Lisa bring in this new concept. She's committed to the retail aspect of it, and I think a really important aspect of her concept is the outside seating, which I think the town is looking for. This raises a perfect opportunity to increase the outside seating in the rear of the building. It won't be out on Main Street, so it'll be it won't be visible to passersby, but I think it's a nice area in the rear of the building. It needs a little cleaning up, mind you, but we will make sure it's clean and presentable for the public to enjoy. Again, I think Lisa is, it's as difficult as it is to say, reaching the heights of Terry Hope, who has been a pillar of our community for so long. We love Terry. She's been great. We consider her, part of our family. We hope to have Lisa in the location for the same amount of time that Terry's been there. But of course, a lot of that is in your hands. So we would just respectfully request that you folks pass along a favorable recommendation to the council so that we can proceed with Lisa and her business partners in this endeavor. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Thank you. This is my last card. Jay Conover.
Yes, my name is Jay Conover, and I live at 25 Reservoir Road, and I've been there about 35 years, and also own the building on the corner of Park Avenue and West Main Street. Excuse me, I have a bit of a cold. And as a neighbor to businesses that serve food, there's a certain amount of picking up that has to be done. And on the face of it, I'm not objecting to this new enterprise, if you will. And I think I'm probably more concerned about the rear of the building than I am about the front of the building and what happens at the front of the building. I mean, the building certainly has its charm up and down that street, and there's some plan to sort of serve outside in the back, which is not pretty at all, and it hasn't been very well maintained. I mean, there's some pretty serious garbage dumpsters and what have you there, sometimes overflowing. And there are weeds there as tall as I am in certain places. And I'd really like to see what that presentation is going to be in the back. And I'm concerned about alcohol being served back there late into the evening, because there's access to the parking lot. You don't even really have to go to the front of the building. You could enter these various spaces from the back of the building. And I think that needs attention, and I think that really needs some consideration before any kind of approval takes place. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Okay, thank you. That is all the speaker cards I have, so if somebody is dying to speak, now's the time to do it. I don't see anyone. Ms. Rohr, you can come up and talk for 3 minutes if you like. You don't have to. Okay. So I'm going to close the public portion of the... But Commissioner Bourgeois has a question for you, so why don't you come on up?
Thank you. Just quickly, I think Mr. Conover raised an interesting point that I had not thought of, and that is, do you plan to control ingress and egress out of the back since alcohol will be served out there? And if so, could you tell me what the plan is?
Yes, absolutely. We do plan to have that area monitored, and just to clarify, we're only looking at maybe 4 to 6 seats to go out there, and we're only going to be serving beer and wine. And the type of customers that we attract to our establishment aren't the type that want to come and get drunk. They're actually the type of people that want to learn and understand wine, and so they're actual connoisseurs. So just as in Chin Chin, which is already 105 seats, we haven't seen any type of bad activity like that. We will put the necessary maintenance to make sure that people are appropriate and that the space is appropriate for dining and service.
But on those stairs, there's no gates or there's no delineation of no alcohol beyond this point on those stairs?
There isn't now because the patio hasn't been used, but as we plan to move forward and if we do get approval to use the patio, we will make sure we do put something to that effect, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Before you sit down, let's make sure there's no other questions. Okay, thanks. Now I'm going to close the public portion of the hearing and look to fellow commissioners for comments, questions of staff, and/or a motion. Commissioner O'Donnell.
The first thing that comes up on an application like this, again, is the town's policy about not substituting restaurants for retail space. That has been of some confusion lately, but I do think that what is being proposed here may in fact increase retail. So I guess one question we ask ourselves is it is a straight square footage like thing. So if you had 50% of 1,000 square feet in retail and now, just as hypothetical, you had 333 square feet, but it looked like you were going to increase your retail sales, would that satisfy the town policy? I don't know. We know that the last time this came up, what satisfied the town's policy was not putting a kitchen in that, because apparently not having a kitchen in there meant it could go to retail very simply. This has a pizza oven, which is not, in my judgment, a substantial kitchen. So under the Gardino rationale, it would sound like that could satisfy the town council. So that having been said in my mind, because I try to divine what the council's policy is, and this seems to fit the council's policy, the only question in my mind then would be the traffic. I agree with people's assessment that the evening is very quiet down there, and I don't think anybody have a problem. The restaurant, however, opens at 11 o'clock in the morning, and town is not quiet at noon. So I guess I wanted to ask staff what their comments are on the traffic impacts of this proposed use.
May I clarify whether that's in regards to the community benefit or the rear of the area?
Just a straight question about would the use substantially impact the traffic? I'm particularly interested in the daytime hours.
Okay. For engineering calculations in regards to traffic, they don't do the calculations on the middays. They look at the PM and AM peak hour trips. They also do an average daily trip increase as well. So they won't have a specific number for, say, a noontime hour. The use does increase both the average daily trips and the PM peak hour trips.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Commissioner Bourgeois.
I have a question for staff, and I'm embarrassed that I need to ask this, but could you remind me of the uses prior to Los Gatos Gourmet?
At one time, you mean just in the space at 109?
Correct.
At one time, it was a creperie, I believe, without seating. Outside of that, it was retail.
Okay, thank you. That was my recollection. I just make a quick comment. When we're looking at this application, in the context of going from Los Gatos Gourmet to Pizza Simpatico. Doesn't seem like that big of a step, but it seems like we've been seeing more and more of these hybrid type spaces, and it almost seems like death by a thousand paper cuts of transition from retail to restaurant in our town. We've seen it with personal service as well. We've seen hybrid units that eventually then get converted all over to personal service, and this is kind of the same thing happening. So I'm particularly concerned that this does not meet the intent of the town's policy, and especially by creating a block of units that are all going to be restaurants in that particular space. So the intensity of the restaurant use in that particular space is of concern to me. We heard about increasing foot traffic in the area. I think if there's any space in town that has unbelievable foot traffic, it's this space. So this has nothing to do with the applicant. I think this is an exemplary applicant, but it has to do with the land use, and the land use runs with the property, regardless of who's there. And so that's why I'm concerned that this is not meeting the policy, and I'm inclined to agree with staff's recommendation of denial.
Other questions or comments? I have a comment. I don't often, but I actually disagree with Commissioner Bourgeois. To my mind, this space, when I think of retail, I'm going to go buy a dress or shoes or something like that. I know that retail encompasses a lot more than that. But these spaces, to me, are already food. They already have a permit for a wine bar. They're already serving food. So to convert it more formally to food, I don't think we're losing retail, especially if they convert the space to a bigger space where they have retail more spread out where everybody can see it. So to me, technically it's conversion, but when you think about those spaces, it's a coffee shop and it's food. Everything from there to the corner is pretty much food. So I don't see it as a real loss of retail space. The only other thing I'd say about it is that when I talk to people that are residents of the town that are a younger demographic, they are clamoring for a lower priced casual option where they can sit outside. And that sounds like what this would be, and we don't provide a lot of that. So to me, we're actually increasing opportunities for sales, et cetera, et cetera. If they come in and buy a bottle of wine, that's great. So yes, I could see where I see your point. It's in violation technically of the policy, but I don't see it as a real loss of retail, particularly in this area. Commissioner O'Donnell.
The reason we're having this discussion in part is because of, I think, the lack of clarity in what the town is doing with this policy, because we sought to enforce it, I thought, strictly in the past, and we found out that that was not how the town council sought to enforce it. And I don't say that critically. They're the ones that tell us what the policy is. And I think we're not technically a conversion. I mean, I think to myself, I can make an excellent argument that convinces me in any event, and that's all I have to do, that in fact this could help retail and not hurt retail. Also, the policy was that because once you convert to a restaurant, you never go home again. You never go back to retail. That's what the town said. But then with Gardino, they said, well, that's not true as long as you don't put a kitchen in. So that was a new rule on you can't go home again. You can go home again, just don't put a kitchen in. This doesn't have a real kitchen. It has a pizza oven. So if I try to follow what the town is telling us their policy is, I think it is arguably not a technical conversion. And if it's not a technical conversion, I'm very sympathetic to what Commissioner Bourgeois is saying, but I'm trying to follow the policy makers. This is, I think, a very good thing for the town. I agree with you. This is a good thing for the town. We really ought to be doing some fairly good studies on what it means anymore. We've always used Saratoga as we don't want to go there. And I say that with some respect to Saratoga. But we haven't done the homework to find out what is the impact of the internet, what is the impact of the recession, all those things to find out whether our policy should be stricter or not. And that's not our job. That is not the Planning Commission's job. That is the Town Council's job. So I'm just going to say I would like to interpret this the way the Town Council apparently is interpreting it. If they want to change it, I will do it the way they tell us. So I think that what I'm saying on the long way round is that I agree with the chair on her interpretation of this. I would just argue that it is not, being a lawyer, I get very nervous when somebody tells me it's a technical violation. It's either a violation or it isn't a violation. I would argue it's not a violation. So.
Other comments? Or Commissioner O'Donnell, do you want to convert that to a motion? Commissioner Erickson, before you do that.
I am basically the same place I believe Commissioner O'Donnell and Commissioner Jensen is. I would offer one additional comment. The proposal as characterized in the staff report is requesting approval to operate a restaurant with indoor and outdoor seating, beer and wine service, and modified hours of operation. It doesn't seem to me that that's a proper characterization of what the business is. It seems to me it is a mixed-use business that, as described, it's partial restaurant, partial retail space, partial wine bar. So it's not, to characterize it as a restaurant is really not, I don't believe, inaccurate. So I'm willing to make a motion.
Have at it.
To recommend approval of the application to the town council and make the required findings with the notation that that they are requesting approval to operate not a restaurant, but a combined service unit that provides a wine bar, specialty retail use, and food and beverage service with indoor and outdoor seating. The rest of the language can remain the same. And that I can make the required finding that the project is categorically exempt pursuant to the sequel required finding as outlined, the required findings for a conditional use permit as required by section 292190 of the town code, and conclude that it is consistent with the traffic policy and community benefit of the town, and make the required finding that it is consistent with the redevelopment plan of the Central Los Gatos redevelopment project area, and that it's not inconsistent with the town's alcohol beverage policy.
A second.
This is second by Commissioner O'Donnell. Commissioner Erickson, I have a question for you that I anticipate might be raised by staff, and that is, in our staff report, one of the concerns was that should we require food to be served, or are we satisfied with food being available? Do you want to address that in your motion at all? If you don't want to, that's fine with me, but I just want to know if you want to do that.
Not clear what your question is.
Well, there was staff suggested in the report that to be consistent with the alcoholic beverage policy, we must require that meals be served with alcohol service, as opposed to the applicant's proposal that they will have food available, but we aren't making anyone eat it. Do you understand
I understand your question. Okay. I don't want to modify my motion as proposed.
Okay. Commissioner O'Donnell.
Let me just comment on the motion in light of the question being asked, because that is exactly what the staff raises, and it's a good point. The only thing I've noticed over the years is that although we say food is required, in fact, of course, that doesn't happen, because if somebody wants to go in and sit down in a restaurant and have a glass of wine and get up and leave, you can't tell them they can't leave. So if we were to impose exactly the same conditions that we impose on Chin Chin, for example, it would make no difference. And therefore, if staff feels that there is some legality to what appears to be a rather silly, well, as far as its enforcement is concerned, and I'd like to hear that. But I agree with Commissioner Erickson. I'm supporting the motion as made, but I'd like to know whether the staff feels that we from their basis, their experience, their knowledge of this, we should be requiring the same implementation we require for restaurants that serve alcohol.
Staff would recommend that you do require the condition, otherwise it would be a bar and someone should just come in and order drinks all the time.
So if we were to say, subject to the the requirements normally imposed upon a restaurant that food be served with alcohol. Words to that effect, that would satisfy your belief.
That would be correct.
I would ask the maker of the motion whether he would consider such language.
I'm okay with that.
I would second that.
Okay, any further, Commissioner Bourgeois?
I'd just like to state for the record, I'm not going to support the motion, and I would just like to reiterate my concern that I feel it's a bit of a slippery slope when we have 100% retail. We wring our hands and we debate and we say, okay, you can be predominantly retail with a little bit of food, and then a few years later, okay, now you're going to be predominantly food with a little bit of retail. It just seems like a very slippery slope, and I'm just concerned about people that take a longer view on these things, seeing that as an avenue to displace more retail. So,
Can we call the question, or do you want to respond to that?
I just want to respond to that briefly. I'm very sympathetic with Commissioner Bourgeois' position. I think it's really difficult, however, in a mixed-use situation like this to deal with, is the percentage going to be more or less than it was, and it doesn't serve any useful purpose to make that judgment, it seems like to me, based on a square footage allocation, unless you're going to preclude one use or another. Because once you mix the use within a square footage assignment, I don't know if that's the appropriate measure. So while I appreciate that, my sense is where we would be recommending approval for mixed use that has specialty retail in it. And it might fluctuate with greater or lesser retail space use and more restaurant, food and beverage use based on the interest of customers over time and how the market changes. So while I'm very sympathetic, I think if we're going to take that line, we need to limit the use specifically and not mixed uses.
Other comments or questions about the motion? Okay, I'm going to call the question. Staff needs to say something. Yes.
We need clarification on two items. One is on regards to what is the community benefit, because the community benefit originally offered by the applicant that's noted in condition number 16 was not accepted by the town. So right now we have no community benefit. And the other clarification is for the conditions of approval, I just want to ensure that that includes the conditions in your desk item that were not included from Parks and Public Works Department.
Okay, Commissioner Erickson, I'm assuming you're including all the conditions that are contained in the staff report, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. And with respect to community benefit, I actually have a question. I raised this earlier, whether we had to make a specific line item community benefit. Can we just say that, as we often do with other things, that the community benefit is to be as determined by the town council? Should they approve of this, or do we have to actually say something?
You can definitely say that and have direct staff to continue to work with the applicant prior to the town council hearing on this matter.
Commissioner Erickson, what's your pleasure?
I have a question for the staff. When you say the town has rejected the proposed community benefit, is that a recommendation of a rejection from the staff?
It wasn't a rejection. It was determined that the community benefit offered would actually result in some impacts to the traffic circulation on Main Street.
Can I suggest to Commissioner Erickson that perhaps he include in his motion what Ms. Bailey indicated we could do, which was to direct the applicant to continue to work with staff with respect to a community benefit?
That's fine.
The second also agrees.
Okay, staff, anything else? Commission, are you ready to vote on the motion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? That passes for recommendation for approval, 3-1. Commissioner Jensen, Erickson, and O'Donnell approving, Commissioner Bourgeois opposing. And I assume this will just be set on the council agenda and the applicant will be notified?
That is correct. This will be set on a council agenda and the application will be renoticed.
Okay. Report from Director of Community Development.
I have no report tonight.
Commission matters. Anybody have anything? Okay, thank you very much. We're adjourned.